If I had to pick one Tennessee wide receiver going into the season who I thought could be considered the best receiver in college football, I would have put my money 1,000% on Cedric Tillman. He became Hendon Hooker's go-to player last year, but he struggled with injury all season, and instead, it left the door open for another player to emerge by the name of Jalin Hyatt. He was one of the fastest players in the class of 2020 and is now one of the best receivers in the entire country. Many know him for his 5-touchdown performance against Alabama, but he's definitely more than that, as he is now one of the top 2023 NFL draft prospects at the receiver spot, will likely be an All-American, and has just been flat out insane. In today's video though, we're not going to be talking about Hyatt that much, as we're going to talk about the 17 wide receivers who are ranked higher than him coming out of high school. Recruiting services differed on how they ranked him, but according to 24/7 Sports, there were 17 guys ranked above him. We're to go through who they are, how they have done, and ultimately where Hyatt should have been ranked. But before we get started, be sure to hit that subscribe button as we're so close to 100K. Leave a like if you want to support today's video. Turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what player I should do next in this series. Now let's get started and talk about the 18 wide receiver recruits that were ranked higher than Jalin Hyatt. At number 18, we have Quentin Johnston from TCU. Coming out of the city of Temple, Texas, the 6'4" Johnston was a freak of nature and was one of the top receivers in the country. He decided to originally commit to Texas, but after some coaching changes, he reopened his recruitment and wanted to go to TCU. He's one of the highest wide receiver recruits in TCU football history, and he went off as a true freshman. He caught 22 passes for 487 yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he would battle injury during his first 2 years at TCU, so his numbers could have been better. As a sophomore in 2021, he caught 33 passes for 612 yards and 6 touchdowns, and many believed he was one of the top receiver prospects going into this year and could have a huge impact. Not only do some people believe he could be the best receiver in this draft, he now has helped his Horned Frogs become undefeated. The most notable play of the season probably came against Kansas, as he caught a game-winning touchdown, which was absolutely insane, and right now he has 45 catches for 716 yards and 5 touchdowns. While many wish that his scoring numbers would be higher, Johnston has been incredible, will likely be an All-Big 12 selection, and should make a nice transition over to the NFL level. Johnston definitely deserves to be ranked higher than this, and is on par with Hyatt. Up next, we have Tao Jones Bell. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, but coming out of Miami Carroll City High School in Florida, Jones Bell was one of the top receivers in the country. At 5'11", he was more of a slot guy, but he had a pretty incredible career. He ended up catching 38 passes for 745 yards and 6 touchdowns as a senior, but it was his athleticism and potential which drew him to Alabama. He eventually committed to the Crimson Tide, but so far, he has not really been able to get anything going there. In 2020, Jones Bell caught 1 pass for -2 yards. In 2021, he caught 2 passes for 16 yards, and in 2022, he's caught 1 pass for 5 yards. Not only has Jones Bell not been able to get going, but this is actually quite shocking, as this is probably Alabama's most lackluster receiver core ever, and with not that many players stepping up, you'd expect Jones Bell to get a couple more targets or to prove himself, but maybe he just isn't that great. Unfortunately, his time in a Bama uniform is probably coming to an end soon, and he'll more than likely transfer, and if I had to guess, maybe go back to Florida or Miami or something like that. He's definitely a big deal coming out of high school, but he does not deserve to be ranked higher than Hyatt. Number 16, we have Log Fungi. I hope I said his name correctly, but coming out of Lee High School in Midland, Texas, the 6'4" star decided he was going to do something different with his career. He committed to Texas Tech, and this was a huge get. As a senior, he caught 73 passes for 1,471 yards, and after being a 3-star recruit for most of his career, he blew up into one of the top receivers in the country by the end of it. He's originally from Cameroon, and while Fungi's had a great story, he's not been able to put it all together so far at Texas Tech. As a freshman in 2020, he caught 4 passes for 64 yards and a touchdown, and then last year, he caught 8 passes for 171 yards and 1 touchdown as well. It was a disappointing first 2 years, but with a new coaching staff and a new quarterback coming in, many expected him to take a jump this year. For the most part, he has done that. So far, he has 23 catches for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns. While he's not putting up all-world numbers, or he won't be entering his name into this year's draft, he's definitely improved each and every year, and the potential and skills are there, and he's someone I think could break out next season. Unfortunately, his career has been underwhelming, and he does not deserve to be ranked higher than Hyatt, but he's not been awful either. Moving over to the SEC, we now need to talk about Marcus Rosemay-Jacksaint. Another Florida kid, he's from St. Thomas Aquinas High School, and the 6'2" Marcus caught 27 passes for 467 yards and 9 touchdowns as a senior, as his team had a 14-0 record. while those stats did not pop off the page, he had a really good junior season, was extremely athletic, and that high school was loaded with talent. He decided coming out of high school he was going to go to Georgia, where he'd be hit with extreme difficulty as a freshman. After catching a touchdown against the Florida Gators, he had a horrific and gruesome injury, and it's probably one of the worst injuries of the last few years in college football, and it could have been a lot worse if his player had landed on him. Thankfully, Jack Saint has bounced back, and despite having poor numbers in his first 2 years, no one could blame him. So far in 2022, Jack Saint has 21 catches for 241 yards and a touchdown. He's definitely not lived up to the hype coming out of high school just yet, but he gets a pass from that injury, and I definitely think he'll be a big-time weapon the next few years at Georgia. For now, he does not deserve to be ranked higher than Hyatt. The next player we're going to talk about was absolutely insane in high school. His name is John Humphreys. He was the number 14 receiver in the class of 2020, and it was for good reason. Coming out of Corona Del Mar High School, the guy had 111 catches for 2,000 yards and 32 touchdowns as a senior. Not only that, but he had over 1,000 yards in 3 out of his 4 years in high school, won all sorts of awards, and left the California high school system as the all-time leader in career touchdowns. The dude was absolutely insane, and he was extremely smart as well, so he decided he was going to go to Stanford. So far, Humphreys has been a mixed bag. He caught 3 passes as a freshman, before in 2021, he catched 21 passes for 287 yards and a touchdown. So far this year, he has 24 catches for 300 yards and a touchdown. The numbers haven't been great, but Humphreys is at least seeing the field. Stanford's also a complete dumpster fire right now, and they've never been known as a wide receiver factory, but maybe Humphreys should have went to a different school in retrospect. The talent is definitely there, but we're going to see if he can put it all together in his next 2 years. Right now, though, he does not deserve to be ranked higher than Hyatt. The next player we need to talk about is E.J. Williams. At one point, Williams looked like the next great college football receiver, as coming out of Phoenix City, Alabama, Williams followed in the footsteps of a guy who came a couple years before him, Justin Ross. In his final 2 years, Williams would catch 84 passes for 1,407 yards and 19 touchdowns. He became one of the top receiver prospects in the country and arrived at Clemson with a considerable amount of hype. As a true freshman, he caught 24 passes for 306 yards and 2 touchdowns and really came on towards the end of the season, so many picked Williams to be the top receiver going into 2021. Except Williams has been very disappointing the last 2 years. In total in 2021, he caught 9 passes for 66 yards, and this year he has 7 catches for 70 yards. I do believe he got into some off-the-field trouble, but correct me if I'm wrong. But overall, Dabo does not seem to be giving EJ much of a chance, and while the talent was there and he showed it as a freshman, he's not been able to put it all together, and while his trajectory was extremely high starting out, at this point, he still does not deserve to be ranked higher than Hyatt. Up next, we need to talk about Rakeem Jarrett. Coming out of the DC area, Jarrett went to St. John's High School and was at one point a 5-star recruit. He caught 60 passes for 950 yards and 7 touchdowns as a senior and decided he was going to commit to LSU. For a while, he was committed to the Tigers, but right around signing day, he chose to go home to Maryland because he grew up a Maryland fan and wanted to help his hometown team win. He also credited both Stephon Diggs and DJ Moore. This was a huge deal for Mike Locksley and the Maryland staff, and Jarrett has been very productive so far in his career. As a freshman, he caught 17 passes for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last year, alongside DAndre Demas, he caught a career-high 62 passes for 829 yards and 5 touchdowns. His numbers have taken a little bit of a dip this year, as he only has 37 catches for 406 yards and 3 scores, but Jarrett is an NFL prospect, has contributed all 3 years, and for the most part, has been living up to his hype coming out of high school. He's been really good, but not as good as Hyatt. The next player we're going to talk about is actually the first receiver from this class we've talked about that has transferred, and his name is Quentin Johnston. Some sites had him as a 5-star, but coming out of DeSmet High School in St. Louis, Missouri, he caught 29 passes for 587 yards and 9 total touchdowns as a senior. He became the top player in the state of Missouri and decided he was going to commit to Notre Dame. He would end up playing in 2 games for the Fighting Irish and since transferred down to UCF. Last year, he would appear in 5 games, but did not catch a single pass. Unless every single website I've checked is broken, Johnson has still not recorded a stat in his 2 years at UCF, and if that's the case, he's been extremely disappointing. Going from someone who was ranked as a 5-star recruit on some sites to not even catching a single pass in your 3-year career is extremely disappointing. I hope Johnson gets it together, and right now, he might be considered the biggest letdown of the 2020 class. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but he definitely didn't deserve to be ranked this high. We have now entered the top 10, and the first guy we're to talk about is Xavier Henderson. Just like a lot of these kids, he was from the state of Florida, and he went to another big-time school in Columbus, which is located in Miami. As a senior, Henderson caught 52 passes for 823 yards and 7 touchdowns, and became one of the top receiver recruits in the country, picking Florida over Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, and Miami. The guy was also extremely fast, and many expected him to translate to this Florida offense right away. In a loaded 2020 team, he caught 9 passes for 148 yards and a touchdown, and then last year, as his role increased, so did his numbers. He caught 26 passes for 277 yards and 2 scores, and this year he's gotten even better. So far, he has 38 catches for 410 yards and 2 touchdowns. Florida's passing game has not been great over the last 2 years, and Henderson has been one of the top options on the team. I definitely think he's an eventual NFL prospect down the road, but he's going to need to increase his stats and be a little bit more productive next year if he wants that to happen. Henderson, though, has lived up to the hype coming out of high school and is a really good player. Still not at the same level as Hyatt, though. At number 9, we have a wide receiver who has sort of been in hot water this year. His name is Jermaine Burton, and he came out of Calabasas High School in California. Burton was a big-time recruit coming out of high school, and he was originally from the state of Georgia, so it was no shocker when he decided to commit to the Bulldogs. Burton would get an opportunity to play right away, and actually impressed as a freshman. He caught 27 passes for 404 yards and 3 touchdowns. In 2021, Burton would stay about the same, as he caught 26 passes for 497 yards and 5 touchdowns. He helped the Bulldogs win a national championship, but seeing what Alabama had just done with Jameson Williams, Burton thought he could be the next star transfer receiver. He decided to leave Georgia for Alabama, where this year you could argue he has become the top receiver on the team. So far, he has 27 catches for 375 yards and 4 touchdowns, and is pretty much on pace to put up the same kind of numbers he had last year. What's disappointing about this is the fact that Alabama actually has a much better passing offense, and he should be that number 1 guy, as this is the worst Alabama receivers have played in a long time. Burton also got in trouble for assaulting fans during the Tennessee victory, and his name has been in a little bit of hot water, but Burton is still an NFL draft prospect, and many believe he'll declare after this year. While Burton has put up decent numbers, he's never really taken that next step. After his tremendous freshman year, many expected him to become a star, and with him transferring to Bama this year, people really thought that was going to happen, but I'd say Burton has been slightly disappointing, but still has been decent. Should not be ranked higher than Hyatt, though. At number 8, we have Bryant Jr. Coming from Centennial High School in California, Bryant was a huge deal. He played both receiver and corner, and was pretty insane. He caught 58 passes for 1,134 yards and also had 10 touchdowns. Because of that, he was an All-American Bowl invitee and decided to stay home and play for USC. Bryant would join a program that had been developing a lot of good receivers, such as Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Tyler Vaughns. As a freshman, he'd walk in and catch 7 passes before he'd have his breakout season in 2021. Last year, he caught 44 passes for 579 yards and 7 touchdowns, and it looked like he was going to be the future of the program and was going to live up to all the hype around his name. Except this year, he has a disappointing 2 catches for 15 yards. Because of that, Bryant decided he was going to use his red shirt this year and is strongly thinking about transferring. I have absolutely no idea what is going on behind the scenes, but that just doesn't seem to make any sense, as USC has a superstar quarterback in Caleb Williams, and he should succeed. Who knows though, but Bryant has at least showed a lot of flash, and if he does decide to transfer, he'll probably put up big numbers there. Once again, he's good, but not as good as Hyatt. The next player we need to talk about is Arian Smith from Georgia. Coming out of Lakeland High School, Arian Smith did a little bit of everything. He returned kicks, played running back, played quarterback, played receiver, and played defensive back. In his senior year, he had 45 tackles, 2 interceptions, ran for 700 yards, had 8 touchdowns, and also had 19 catches for 382 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's one of those joystick players that could do a little bit of everything and decided to commit to Georgia. He arrived in Athens with a lot of hype, but so far has not been able to get anything going in his career. As a freshman, he caught 2 passes for 86 yards and a touchdown, and last year caught 3 passes for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. His catch-to-touchdown ratio is pretty insane, but unfortunately he's not seeing the field the way he would like. This year he has 2 catches for 59 yards, and it's been a disappointing career for Smith, and I'm not sure why he hasn't played, and if you're a Georgia fan, let me know down below. Smith was great coming out of high school, but has not been able to live up to the hype. The number 6 receiver in the class of 2020 was a player by the name of Jalen McMillan. Coming out of San Joaquin Memorial High School in Fresno, McMillan was a superstar during his time there. In his career, he caught 260 passes for 5,234 yards with 54 touchdowns. He played in 50 career games, was a Division I baseball prospect, and also was in Junior Olympic track and field. The guy was an insane athlete, and he was going to be a star wherever he decided to go. Somewhat surprisingly, he committed to Washington, and after catching one pass in 2020, would emerge last year. Despite all the nonsense that went on for Washington's offense last year, McMillan still caught 39 passes for 470 yards and 3 touchdowns. This year, they have a good coach and a good quarterback in Michael Penix, and McMillan has gotten even better. He has 57 catches for 792 yards and 6 touchdowns, and is more than likely on his way to becoming an NFL draft prospect and an 1,000-yard receiver. McMillan has definitely lived up to the hype, and so far has been one of the better players from this class. He has been really good, and I would put him just behind Hyatt. The next player we're going to talk about is G. Scott. Coming out of Eastside Catholic High School in the state of Washington, Scott was a borderline 5-star recruit. He's extremely hyped, as a senior, he caught 76 passes for 1,453 yards and 15 touchdowns. He was ranked as the number 2 player in the state of Washington and decided to go across the country to play for Brian Hartline at Ohio State. Scott would not see the field in 2020, and then going into 2021, he would convert to a different position. He decided to move from wide receiver to tight end because of all the players that would have been ahead of him. So far in 2 years, Scott's caught 9 passes for 54 yards and a touchdown, and you could definitely argue has been disappointing and has not lived up to the hype. Ohio State fans really do love him though, and he has a lot of potential, but maybe it's just because he hasn't had a chance to see the field. The jury is still out on him, but right now, Scott has been a little bit disappointing and would not be ranked higher than Hyatt. We now get to talk about one of 4 5-star wide receivers from this class, and of course there's always that one guy who causes some trouble. Coming out of Tomball, Texas, DAndre Demas was a 5-star player, a super athlete, and was expected to be a superstar at the next level. He caught 50 passes for 1,574 yards and 23 touchdowns, and eventually decided to commit to Texas A&M. I don't know what it is, but it seems Jimbo Fisher has a lot of players like this. In 2020, Demas would play in 4 games, but would not register a single stat. Last year in 2021, Demas would start a couple of games, catching 15 passes for 235 yards and a touchdown. What's unfortunate is he go down with a late season injury, and A&M has been looking for that number 1 wide receiver for quite a while now, and Demas had all the potential and tools to make that happen. Unfortunately though, he saw that late season injury, but that was the least of his worries. This past offseason, he got into some trouble and was arrested and entered the portal. He decided to sit out the entire 2022 season, and I hope he gets things back on track, learns from his mistakes, and gets to at least finish his career. He's an extremely talented player, and he will definitely get a second chance, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with his career. He should not be ranked higher than Hyatt. Up next, we get to talk about the number 3 receiver in the country, Keyshawn Boutte. Coming out of Westgate High School in New Iberia, Louisiana, Boutte was ranked as the number 1 receiver in the country by some people. As a senior, Boutte did a little bit of everything. He ran for 874 yards and 12 touchdowns, and also caught 47 passes for 1,005 yards and 15 scores. With Rakeem Jarrett flipping over to Maryland, Boutte would get an opportunity to be a star as a freshman. Alongside Terrace Marshall, Boutte would catch 45 passes for 735 yards and 5 touchdowns, including a historical performance at the end of the year. In 2021, Boutte would return and had an insane start, but would get hurt. He finished with 38 catches for 509 yards and 9 touchdowns. Going into this year, some thought he could be the best wide receiver prospect in this year's draft, but he has been disappointing. He has 38 catches for 388 yards and a touchdown. I'm not quite sure why his stats and his role has dropped off so much, but no matter what, he's probably going to be a first-round pick. Boutte has definitely lived up to the hype, and looking back, I would probably barely have him ranked ahead of Hyatt. At number 2, we get to talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba, who hailed from Rockwall, Texas. He was a 5-star recruit, and as a senior would catch 104 passes for 2,094 yards and 35 touchdowns. He became one of the best wide receivers in Texas high school football history, amassing over 5,300 yards and 82 scores. The guy was absolutely insane and decided to go across the country to play for Brian Hartline at Ohio State. Smith-Njigba didn't have insane stats as a freshman, but he did have an insane catch. He had a highlight reel-worthy play and finished the year with 10 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown. Last year, as the backup to Olave and Wilson, he caught 95 passes for 1,006 yards and 9 touchdowns. Those stats were insane, and many people believed he was the best receiver in college football this year. Unfortunately, Njigba has struggled with injury and has barely seen the field. He has 5 total catches for 43 yards without a touchdown. He's barely played in any games, but it hasn't hurt Ohio State, as both Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. have stepped up. He'll likely be drafted in the first round this year, and Smith-Njigba has 100% lived up to the hype. One of the other guys who stepped up in his absence was Julian Fleming, who's the last player we're going to talk about today. Fleming was the number 1 receiver in the class of 2020 and the 4th best prospect nationally. He went to Southern Columbia High School in Pennsylvania and was pretty insane. He was Pennsylvania's Gatorade Player of the Year and had 72 catches for 1,582 yards and 22 touchdowns as a senior. He's the state's career leader in touchdown catches with 77 and receiving yards with 5,514. He decided to go a state over and play for Ohio State. Unfortunately, Fleming was very disappointing in his first 2 years. He caught 7 passes in 2020 and then 12 passes in 2021. Many were labeling him as a bust and someone who could transfer, but in Smith-Njigba's absence, Fleming has gotten a chance to redeem himself, and it's been awesome to watch. So far, he has 22 catches for 385 yards and 6 touchdowns, and while he is not a superstar by any means, he's become efficient, has improved, has been catching touchdowns, and will likely get an opportunity to have an expanded role next year. He'll more than likely go to the NFL in a year or two, and while he has not lived up to being the #1 receiver in the class, he's not been a complete bust either, and Fleming is only going to get better. I would not have him ranked higher than Hyatt, though. Looking back, there were only 2 players I would have ranked higher than Hyatt, and that is both Smith-Njigba and Keyshawn Boutte. Behind him, I'd have Julian Fleming, Jalen McMillan, Jermaine Burton, Xavier Henderson, Rakeem Jarrett, and Quentin Johnston, and then the rest of them have for the most part been disappointing. At least for the top 19 players in the class, there have been some stars and there's been some bust, but Hyatt has been one of the better stories, and he's probably going to be insane at the next level. But what do you guys think? If you're a fan of any of the players in today's video, be sure to give me your thoughts down below. Let me know what player, topic, team, or situation I could cover next. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including the running backs ranked ahead of Blake Corum. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.